You're tuned in to More Living with Jim Brogan, broadcast live from the Brogan Financial Studios at News Talk 98.7, where old-fashioned values, expert knowledge, and genuine understanding come together to give you the retirement straight talk you deserve. Jim's a former National Advisor of the Year recipient and a financial educator, and he's here today to talk about how you can live out the best years of your life. Jim and the Brogan Financial team have been helping retirees and pre-retirees across the Southeast for over 20 years in their pursuit of financial independence. You can reach them during the week at 865-862-6800. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn, because More Living with Jim Brogan starts now.
Hello, East Tennessee. Welcome to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. We're with you every Saturday here at News Talk 98.7 WOKI, 9 to 10 a.m. and again from 3 to 4 p.m. Today I want to talk about the growing retirement crisis that we're seeing in America. We have a lot of issues going on. Fundamentally, the biggest issue is people are living longer and longer lives, and that necessitates a stronger need for your money to last for more years. Longevity of life is the single biggest driver, in my view, of retirement risks that we face today. If you retire at 65 years old, you're typically going to live for 25 to 30 years in retirement. Now, when I teach my classes and I ask that question, how long do you think you'll need your money to last? I usually get answers like 85, 87. But the reality is, a married couple today, it's very likely that one of you will live into your 90s. So people are living longer lives, and they don't want to necessarily work longer, though. They want more time to enjoy their retirement lifestyle. And the demographics that we're seeing today has created a massive impact on our retirement system, in my view. Now, in addition to the savings issues, with people being able to save enough to retire, we also have problems with Social Security and Medicare, of course. Being able to fund, and, you know, we've got budget shortfalls. In the next 10 years, both of those systems will be, in financial dire straits. We also are seeing today more Americans making hardship withdrawals from their retirement accounts. So they're making withdrawals before they get to retirement age with a hardship because they're having a hard time making ends meet. We're also seeing retirement savers prefer protection over growth of their investment. And finally, we'll talk about some of the challenges for younger generations and how you can start getting ahead. So the bottom line is you want solutions and ways that you can be effective and successful. So we're going to dive into kind of some of the challenges today in today's world, and then we'll talk about what you can do about it. I think you can do things about it. I'm optimistic. I think that with a good plan, you can still be very, very successful. We do have a spending problem in America. We have a spending problem at the government level. We have a spending problem at the household level. And that's what the data says. So we've got to get some of those things under control. But let's dive right into the fact that Americans are living longer and longer lives. It is putting a massive strain on the system. There's a debate about the future of Social Security itself, which will face a funding shortfall, as I mentioned, in less than a decade. Now, there's been several proposals. Some Republican lawmakers have proposed raising the retirement age. Many say, I've talked many times on this show about the fact that more and more people are doing part-time work when they first retire. They're kind of easing into retirement. They don't just go from full-time work to nothing. They've maybe got a few years of a transition in there with part-time work, and there are tremendous financial benefits of that. We've also talked about the trend of unretirement, where people want to start working again some part-time. Here's the challenge, though, and the reality of that. Aging in the workplace, according to a 2022 AARP strategy, the majority of workers over age 50 say that they face ageism at work, age discrimination. And because of ill health or an unexpected job loss, many older Americans stop working before they plan to. And in fact, the median age of retirement in the United States is 62, which is even lower than the traditional retirement age that we think of 65. So, the Republicans have proposed raising retirement age. The Democrats are proposing doing away with the Social Security payroll tax income cap. Right now in 2024, if you make more than, once you get up over $168,600 of income, you're exempted from the Social Security payroll tax of 12.4%. 6.2% of that is being paid by your employer, and the other 6.2% is being paid by you. That is the bulk of the payroll tax. So there's a lot of assessments. We also are seeing 3 in 10 Americans age 55 and older have no money to put away for retirement. Certainly that's an issue. Here's the bottom line from my perspective. We've had this really 40-year experiment of a voluntary, do-it-yourself based pension system. So if you think about it, when 401ks and IRAs came about, and IRAs were created by ERISA in 1975, and then 401ks started becoming popular, 403bs, other retirement account options in the early 80s. So it's been 40 years. And there's been a shift of burden for retirement that shifted from the employer putting money aside into a traditional pension that pays you income for life, and the burden has shifted to the individual investor. And I think that's a good way to think about it. It's a do-it-yourself based pension system. You add money to your 401k, your employer matches some of that, hopefully. You can put more in. In many employers, the employer automatically puts in, whether you do or not. But the normal is that the most common is that you put some in, the employer will match part of it. Then you have to pick the investment choices within the 401k. So you're kind of do it yourself. And that system has not provided very good benefits. I think a lot of that is a human nature. When we look at spending today, we want to, rule number one of accumulating wealth is you have to spend less money than you make. And if you're putting more money into your 401k, that means you have to spend even less money. So it creates a challenge. And we're seeing inflation. We're going to talk about the economic challenges here in one of the later segments. But I think that the biggest thing is we have to take control of our financial future. If you're a young person today, you have got to start saving early. Probably the number one tool young people can understand today is the power of time and the value of compound interest over time. Getting started early is so critically important. If you're an older worker and you don't have a lot saved, then you're going to have to it's a mix of controlling your spending, controlling your budgeting, and in addition to saving as much as you can. Because remember, whatever your spending needs are, that's how much income you're going to need in retirement, including Social Security, of course. But that's going to define your spending. Your last 5 to 10 years of spending are going to define how much income you need in retirement. I also think there's issues with employer plans because like 401ks and 403bs, because there's so much regulation. It puts a lot of burden on the employer as a fiduciary, and the financial impact and stress is being put on the employee, but the employer under the law is considered a fiduciary when they set up a retirement plan. And there have been so many lawsuits over the years where lawyers have been suing 401k plans and other company plans because the employer was not acting in their fiduciary capacity that they maybe should have. And what that's done is it's caused more and more regulation of company plans. It's caused more and more control of the investment options you have. There aren't a lot of investment options in a typical 401k plan. You might have 10 or 12 or 15 options. And for safe investment, things that have guaranteed principal, usually in a 401k, there's only one option. It's usually some sort of a money market account or what they call a stable value fund, and those are not paying very well right now. You cannot get a 5% CD in most 401k plans. So there's a real limitation due to the nature of how these laws have been created and what they demand of both the employer and the employee. There's a limitation building wealth in a retirement account. Yet that is, for tax purposes, tax-wise, that's the best place to be building wealth. But, do you put it on autopilot and make your contributions go in there? Do you make wise decisions in allocating the 401k and picking effective strategies? Many other nations around the world actually make the employer contribute money to a retirement account for the employee. Today, if we look at Australia, Australia requires employers to put a portion of a worker's income into a fund. And today, Australia has the 54th largest population in the world, but they have the fourth largest retirement system. So what's the answer? I think we have a classic battle between privatization and government-run, government control. And fortunately, we are seeing more private companies, and one of the ones that's leading the way is BlackRock, that are trying to create options in 401k plans where you can save and invest in mutual funds for long-term growth, but you can also invest in vehicles that can provide you with guaranteed income, kind of like a pension annuity, where you kind of combine the two things together to produce growth over the long term to fight inflation, but also have some guarantees of protected income. There's a lot of power in that. I think an investor today can get greater results doing that on their own in an IRA, where they can pick from a wide array of instruments in the financial industry, rather than in a 401k where, if your plan is Vanguard and that's who runs your 401k, it's going to be Vanguard's option. That's the only option you're going to have. And I think access to options and flexibility is so critically important. And that means as you get older, you should be looking at opportunities to get those company plan monies into an IRA where you have greater control. Now, there's pros and cons to all of that. I can't get into all of that today. But you want to have greater control and flexibility of your investment choices so you can then plan and put together a program that can provide you with long-term growth to fight inflation, but also some underlying income guarantees if that's what you desire. And I mentioned earlier, but for retirement age investors, it is about keeping their nest egg safe. And that's becoming more and more common and more popular with retirement Americans. Now, on the flip side, we do have more Americans making hardship withdrawals from their retirement accounts. What are we seeing? Why is this? What does this tell us about the economic reality of where we are today with inflation and with higher interest rates. Stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan. We'll be right back. You're listening to News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back. This is More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. If there were ways to protect your money with an effective tax strategy, wouldn't you want to know? You know, it's not how much you make, it's how much you get to keep. So it's not only gross income, it's minimizing that tax bill. Failure to properly plan for taxes could be one of the biggest retirement mistakes I think you can make. Multiple relief packages, the CARES Act, our national debt, our deficit spending, these are all challenges that could be reflected on your future tax bill. So I'd like to invite you to my class coming up Tuesday night at Pellissippi State. It's through their Pellissippi State's Community Outreach Adult Education. It is on May the 7th. That is this Tuesday evening, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. One-night class, tax planning, and your retirement. I'm going to talk about the history of income taxes because I think that's very, very important to understand to know where we may be headed. We'll talk about current and future tax rates. We are having a tax increase at the end of next year. How to plan for taxes now and in retirement, and we'll have so much more. So to find out more, you can go to PellissippiTaxPlanning.com. Again, PellissippiTaxPlanning.com. You can download a syllabus. You can also click to register for the class this Tuesday, May 7th, 6:30 p.m. at the Hardin Valley location. More Americans are making hardship withdrawals from their retirement accounts, meaning they're not retired yet. They're under age 59 and a half, and they're having a hard time financially, so they're having to make a hardship withdrawal prior to 59 and a half. So the Vanguard Group noted that last year in 2023, early withdrawals were made from a record 3.6% of retirement accounts they manage. Now, before the pandemic, the average was about 2%. So in other words, about 2% of accounts that are in retirement accounts with Vanguard, either IRA, 401k, 403b, or whatever, 2% were taking money out early because of financial hardship. Now it's up to 3.6%. So that's almost double. Now it also went up. It was 2.8% in 2022. You know, that was, I think, obviously things got elevated coming out of the pandemic, but here we are. And it's almost doubled from 2019. So if we look at what's going on economically, you know, there are some economic contradictions. We have low unemployment rates. Now, we did get a jobs report this week. It did show a tick up in unemployment. And that's very, very important, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But unemployment still is under 4%. We have very, very high values in housing and stock markets. So why are people having a hard time meeting ends? And it's because of the significant inflation post-pandemic. It has severely impacted people's purchasing power and cost of living. So it's really kind of an economic paradox. The economy, the economic numbers have been pretty strong. But inflation has ticked back up a little bit. It's ticking up near 3.5% now. And it had been around 3 to 3.2. It's definitely been climbing. You may say, well, you know, it feels like worse than that. And the reason it does feel like worse than that is because that's on top of the high inflation we had in the last couple of years. You know, in the last 4 years, inflation's gone up 20%. So, you know, I think what we're seeing is we're seeing strong employment. We're seeing people making money. We're seeing wage inflation. We are seeing high equity values in real estate. We are seeing all-time market highs in the stock market. But people are having a hard time paying their bills when we go to our grocery store, especially. It's unbelievable. what I used to could get for $20 or $30, it seems like now is going to be $60 to buy the same amount of stuff. So we're all feeling that. But what that's happening, what that's causing is it's causing more and more individuals to tap into their retirement funds prematurely. Then there's the long-term trends. When you tap into retirement savings early, that is very concerning because you may not be considering your long-term financial needs into your 70s and 80s. So bottom line, there's a mismatch between the positive economic indicators reported in the news and the harsh economic realities that many are facing, which could lead to decisions that could jeopardize our future financial stability. This underscores the complexities of the current economic conditions and the urgent need for strategies to manage and mitigate early withdrawals from retirement savings. Do you have a plan? I think you have to have a plan in today's world. Younger people starting out need to have a plan. As you age and you get into your 40s, you need to have a plan. Certainly, as you get closer to retirement, you need a plan. And, of course, in retirement, you need a plan. But a plan doesn't mean just picking the right investments. It is so much more than that. A plan is looking at certainly your budget, determining your income needs and your income plan while you're working and then when you're retired. How much are you spending versus how much you're bringing home? Have you really put that stuff down on paper? Are you minimizing the effect of Uncle Sam? I mentioned my tax planning class that's coming up on Tuesday night at Pellissippi Hardin Valley. When we look at the different ways we can build wealth, obviously, if we can save more, that's step number one. Or if we can spend less, then we can now save more. We also need to pick wise investments. We also need to minimize the impact of income taxes. And I think our income tax environment today is probably the best that we'll see, the lowest that we'll see for the rest of our lifetimes. I'm 54. Even my children my adult children that are 18 and 23 years old, to be quite frank, I don't know if they'll ever see an income tax situation that will be this friendly when it comes to federal income tax for the rest of their lives. The highest income tax bracket is 37%. We have, since 1986, our highest income tax bracket has been less than 40%. If you go back and look historically, tax brackets in the past have been a lot higher than that. So the point, though, is that when you can, part of a financial plan is looking at the impact of income taxes. What are you paying now versus what do you pay later? Should you do a traditional 401k or a Roth 401k, a traditional IRA? Should you be doing Roth conversions? Tax planning is critically important. Then there's your estate plan. There's, how are you going to be taken care of as you age? And then how are you going to transition your life savings to your loved ones? And how can you do it in a way that creates legacy? How are you going to pay for health care expenses? There are so many things involved in a plan. So I encourage you to sit down and try to get your arms around some of this. How can you create a written plan? Certainly that's what we do at Brogan Financial. You can hire a professional to do it. There are a lot of self-help options online. But that is what we do. So if you'd like to talk to us, we'd love to talk to you. You can give us a call at 865-862-6800, or you can email us info@broganfinancial.com. Now, when we come back, we're going to talk about a recent survey for retirement age investors that are talking about the focus on keeping their nest eggs safe being more important than focusing on growth of the investment. What are the implications, and what does that mean you should be doing? Stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way, as you listen to News Talk 98.7 WOKI. If you're getting close to retirement or you're already retired, are you more concerned about growth of your current investment or protection of your current investment and keeping the nest egg safe? Global Atlantic's 2024 Retirement Outlook Survey is out. They conducted the study in December of 2023. And they surveyed investors 55 to 75 years old with investment assets ranging from $250,000 to $1 million. 61% of the respondents said they favor asset protection over investment growth. And that's despite a positive performance from the S&P 500 in 2023 that was over 20%. And only 54% of those surveyed believe their assets are sufficiently shielded against market downturns. And I think that stems from the 2022 market slump, which saw the S&P 500 decline over 18%. And it leaves, it's a recency bias. It leaves a lasting lesson on our need for financial stability. So the survey highlights a strong preference for financial products that ensure stability and income. 65% of the respondents say they emphasize the importance of retirement income is their number one focus. And according to the overwhelming majority would like investment strategies that limit downside risk while allowing for potential growth. Well, how do you do that? That sounds good. How do you invest and limit downside with potential growth? And that is, I think, especially as we get closer to retirement, that is the number one thing people should be addressing in their retirement plan. The impact of deep losses is critically important to understand. Honestly, most people 10, 15, 20% decline in the stock market. Let's look at the math of that. If I have $100,000 and I lose 20%, I now have $80,000. To get from $80,000 back to $100,000, I've got to make 25%. So I lost 20. I have to make 25 to get back to where I was. Now, if I lose 40%, if you lose 40% in the market, which is a typical bear market, average bear market since 1900, about every 8 years, about a 40% downturn. To get back to even, you have to make 67%. That math is extremely cruel. You could almost think of it as a tax on downside volatility. The steep losses, I call that the tail risk. Seeing a 35-40% loss or even more can be devastating to come back from, especially if you're close to retirement and especially if you're needing to draw retirement income soon. So we need strategies to help protect that big downturn. And there's different ways to do that. Some ways are to have more diversification in your risk portfolio. Don't just be in the stock market. Don't just be in stocks and bonds either, because that has not worked very well the last 5 years. Have other things. Have real estate. Have commodities. Have energy. Have bonds that can go up with rising rates rather than down. There are a lot of other things you can do other than just stocks and traditional bonds. So one way is to have a plan that's more diversified where you're kind of hedging that downturn, that downside risk. And another would be to own volatility in your portfolio. Now, what in the heck does that mean? It means having a hedge in your portfolio of a small amount of money, 4, 5, 6% maybe, that specifically profits if there is a steep downturn in the market. There is a cost for that. To buy that volatility protection, there's a cost. There are different ways to provide for that cost, but the bottom line is you may have to give up just a little bit of your upside potential in order to have that downside protection. But that's another way that you can reduce downside risk while still having potential for growth. And then the number one way, in my opinion, the number one need is to know that you don't have to touch your risk investments for the next 6 or 7 years. When we invest at risk, we don't know what's going to happen in the short term. Markets are terribly unpredictable in the short term, and they have the potential to be terribly volatile in the short term. We just don't know what we're going to get. When we invest at risk in the market, we need time on our side. I mentioned earlier in the show, time is one of the biggest benefits or the biggest ways to be able to accumulate wealth. You've got to have some time on your side to go through the inevitable ups and downs of the market. Yes, you probably need greater diversification to limit the downside along the way. But then the key is that your current income need can be met from safe and stable holdings that you can draw from things like CDs and individual bonds and things like that. Now, one of the things that came up in this study from Global Atlantic is the benefit of considering annuities with annuity income guarantees. And I do want to just talk on that briefly. The word annuity can be kind of an interesting word because, they kind of got a bad name for a while. Then they started being talked about much more favorably. Annuities come in a lot of shapes and sizes and varieties. There are all kinds of different kinds of annuities. There are variable annuities, which are kind of like mutual funds inside of an annuity, and then there are fixed rate annuities, which actually I would call those CD type annuities. You earn a fixed rate for a fixed period of time, and then the money matures and you can take it out. There are pension type annuities where you get income from life. Now, in a traditional pension annuity, when you die, the money's gone. But what we're seeing today is we're seeing a blending of annuities where you can maintain the control of accumulation. It's your money. You can do whatever you want with it. But you have the income guarantees on top of it that you get in a pension annuity. And those types of vehicles are becoming more and more popular. There are also what are called fixed indexed annuities, which provide more growth potential than a CD or bond in a good market, and then in the negative market, you never lose. But you're not going to make as much in a good market. So the word annuity can be tricky, and I think you have to tread with caution. What I have found in the industry is most professionals fall in one of two categories. One is the person who, or the advisor that they like to put a lot of money, their clients' money in annuities. And annuities, one of the negatives of annuities is they usually, not all, but they usually have surrender penalties, and those surrender penalties are pretty large, usually 8, 9, 10% if it's cashed in early. So they have, commitments of this time. And, I would just not be typically a fan of somebody putting 70% of their money in something that's not liquid. You've got 10% liquidity usually in most of these products, but you just have to be careful. On the same token, the other side is I see advisors that just don't do any kind of annuity work. They feel like it's a bad word. Insurance companies are bad. They don't like annuities. I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. We just have to realize that there are pros and cons to anything that you do. And can it be one of many tools that you have to provide more guaranteed income? Sure. Can it provide a tool to give you more growth with limiting your downside risk? Sure. But you're not going to make as much. They're just pros and cons, and you need a lot of different things. And I think that the most valued advisor that you could find would be someone who can do all of that and give you fiduciary advice, meaning they protect your best interest at all times, and that can pull all of these things together to make sure you have the liquidity you need, that you have the stability of income you need. Don't underestimate the need for growth. You know, in the first segment, I talked about people living longer and longer lives. Most people are going to live 25 to 30 years in retirement. You've got to be concerned about inflation and growing your investment, and risk investments are the best way to do that. They just expose us to a lot of short-term risk. And in this segment, I've talked about a couple of ways to reduce that risk, which is living on stable income in the short term, and then also having more diversification so you don't suffer those deep losses. But I think it's important to consider all the things that are out there. Certainly there are some things that I don't particularly love. You know, as an example, I don't love variable annuities. There's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not a fan. Does that mean that there would never be an instance where a variable annuity could help somebody? No, not at all. That does not mean that. It means they have limitations that I don't love, but there could be situations where they make sense. So you should just be getting impartial, objective fiduciary advice. So when we come back, I'm going to talk about what should you look for when you're hiring an advisor or an advisory firm. You know, what types of questions should you be asking? What should that process look like? Stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm Jim Brogan. We're talking about some of the challenges in today's world. We have a coming retirement crisis, I think. If you look at the data, people are living longer and longer lives. People have saved less and less. The great experiment over the last 40 years of putting more of the impetus to save for retirement on the individual and not the company, with things like 401ks and 403bs where you invest your own money, has not worked very well. And I think that's human nature. But bottom line is, what can you be doing to get ahead? We've covered a lot of those things today. Now, one of the things that's critically important is to minimize our expenses, and one of our top expenses we need to minimize is our tax. Income taxes for most of us, especially once you're in retirement, is the largest expense you'll pay over your remaining lifetime, even more than healthcare expense. My next class through Pellissippi State Community College is Tuesday night at Pellissippi Hardin Valley. It's adult education. If you're near retirement or retired, this is about tax planning. The name of the course, Tax Planning in Your Retirement. You can go to PellissippiTaxPlanning.com for more information. Again, it's Tuesday, May 7th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. and just a one-night, 2-hour class where I cover all the things you need to understand about taxation. Not all, but most, as much as I can in 2 hours of how you can, over time, reduce your tax bill. Now, when it comes to looking for professional advice, how do you do that? And what do you look for? First off, do you need professional advice? You know, this is an interesting, I was having a conversation earlier this week with a friend, and he was talking about, you know, there's so many self-help options online. People can pick good investments. You know, what's it worth? You know, according to Vanguard, who did a study on this years ago, there's a difference in financial planning and investment management. Investment management, it is a component of financial planning. But it's just one component of financial planning. There are other things like income planning, which would include Social Security election. How much can you draw? Where do you draw your income from? Social Security election, I mentioned that. There's the tax planning, I've mentioned that. There's legal planning. There's healthcare expenses. There's a lot of different connected dots. And Vanguard study several years ago said that a true comprehensive financial planning professional can provide 3 to as much as 3.5 or 4% per year in benefits. And that's not just going to be through investment performance or through sheltering losses. It's due to the comprehensive nature of the planning. So what should you look for when you look for professional advice? There's a lot in the industry that's been talked about this word fiduciary. And the Department of Labor is regulating it and just passed a rule that if an advisor gives advice on a retirement account, he or she will be considered a fiduciary, which means that person must act with your best interests in mind. It's called the best interest standard. It is the highest responsibility one person or firm can have to another financially. It is very important. Now, that being said, Bernie Madoff was regulated as a fiduciary. We see stories on a monthly basis of advisories and advisory firms across the country, and even big firms, some of the big brokerage wirehouses that have issues where they have advisors who are regulated as a fiduciary and yet did not protect their client's best interest. So how can you really know? So I think one important factor is, how is the advisor compensated and what potential conflicts of interest are there? And to just understand, no matter how they're compensated, there's conflicts of interest. You know, at my firm, Brogan Financial, we are fee-based. And what that means is typically we charge a percentage of the assets that we manage for our clients. And then what that percentage pays for is comprehensive financial planning and wealth management. And, a typical fee might be around 1% of risk investment. Now, most of our clients actually on all their holdings pay less than that, but that'd be a typical thing. But how are they being compensated? We don't, for example, ever get a commission on the sale of a stock or a bond or a mutual fund. So we're not even licensed to get a commission on a sale or a purchase of a security. And I think that is important. I have some colleagues who are still commission-based advisors, and I know they try to do best by their clients. If somebody's just commission-based, they are not held typically to a fiduciary responsibility unless they are now giving advice on a retirement account. But then how do you do that? I mean, if you're getting a commission up front on the recommendation, that becomes difficult because some things are going to pay more. There's going to be mandates from the companies that you work for if you're not independent that they want you to do this or do that, or they shade you a certain way. There's just conflict. Now, but even for me, charging a percentage, well, that does mean if a client puts more money with me, then my fee goes up, right? If you have $800,000 invested with me and then you add another $1 million, my fee is going to increase. However, the amount of value that I can deliver or that an advisor can deliver also goes up with greater wealth because there are more opportunities. There's also more dangers and pitfalls with things like tax planning. There's just a lot of things that come into play. So I think looking for someone who walks you through a process and isn't selling products and looks at how can you put together a financial plan that can help you meet your goals and give you the greatest likelihood that you can meet your goals. I think these surveys that show people want protection more than growth as they get near retirement emphasizes the need to try to meet your goal and give you the highest probability you'll get there and mitigate the risks along the way. We've discussed wealth today because greater wealth provides for more living so you can live the best years of your life your way. Many thanks to Wayne for engineering the show. Thanks to Jill for helping produce the show. Check us out online at broganfinancial.com. Have a wonderful weekend. This is More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
The views expressed by Jim Brogan and his guests are not that of Cumulus Media. Any discussion of financial, legal, and tax planning strategies is not intended to be individualized advice and is general in nature. Always consult with your advisor for advice specific to your needs. This program's content does not represent a recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or investment by Jim Brogan or Brogan Financial Incorporated.